Thank you, Council President and members. I'm going to go through this. You've seen this presentation, but I'm going to do the abbreviated version. So to remind folks that may be watching or are in the audience that for the budget that we do, I have the honor and the responsibility that every year to present a budget to the city and to the City Council. That was done at the beginning of August at that first meeting. And this is the general fund budget. And so this budget, how we come about this, it comes through a lot of public input. We do a lot of meetings, a lot of opportunities, survey, and of course all council members, you hear from folks, and we bring all that together. We talk during our retreat, we talk throughout the year at study sessions. So the input is significant, including the input tonight, which is a public hearing on the preliminary levy. And of course, we have all the way up until the end of the month, or the end of the year, December, which is when we'll have another public hearing in Truth and Taxation, give public even more opportunity to weigh in. We've done surveys. That's how we determine whether there's no different than business does, customer satisfaction surveys. We did this in 2019. We'll be doing another one next year in partnership with St. Cloud State University Survey Department. As you can see, our surveys usually come back very high on the quality of service, and that's thanks to a tremendous amount of talent and dedication from the people who work for the City of St. Cloud. Top priorities that always come up in the surveys, and the same thing that comes up almost every time we're talking. I know a number of you are out campaigning and door knocking. This is what you hear from people. Public safety, road conditions, traffic. Those are our top priorities, and I believe firmly that those, from a principled perspective, are the top priorities of any city. Our guidelines that guide us in this process, always the most important thing to me, it's not my money. We're entrusted with public dollars. So those public dollars that we're entrusted with, there's different opinions as to how we're spending them, but it's important that we treat it as the dollars of our community. So we do that. We focus on what's a core city functions, city priorities, and we also have a policy that both the administration and the council have had where we capture the growth. Rather than raising the tax rate, we capture the growth. New construction, new valuations in good times. In good times, that means we can do more. In bad times, that means we have to do things differently. But even in good times, we do things differently to get the best bang for the buck. Our growth, as you can see, there were times, in fact, right after the Great Recession of 2008, where we had a period of time, we went from 12% valuation increases to a 5% reduction in valuation. We're coming out of that. You see a little dip from 2021, but still growth. So we capture that growth as we put together our budget. This is from the last several years. Here's the preliminary 2022 tax levy. And again, we capture that growth. That's where you see there is no increase in the tax rate. It's important, I believe this from every budget that we've had, we haven't increased the tax rate. We capture that growth. But I think it's also important, even more so with the year that we've had with COVID-19, the restrictions and the financial burden that it's had on families and individuals and businesses, that we don't increase that burden. So we're keeping that flat. This is the total levy, and that is what we're talking about tonight. Tonight is the preliminary levy. So what this does is it sets the cap on what we can collect in property taxes. That doesn't mean we can't change the budget from here to December, that hearing, but we can't add any additional dollars from the property taxes. Sets that ceiling, and we can still have discussions, and we'll still take input all the way up until the budget is approved in December at the Truth and Taxation hearing. Give you an indication of how we compare to the state. This is the state average. The top line is what property tax on an average basis for populations or cities above 2,500 in population. As you can see, we're fiscally responsible and prudent with your tax dollars. We're far below the average for the state of Minnesota, and we do that by doing things creatively, creating partnerships, and doing things often, then keeping an eye on what is the core function. So when tough times are tough, we don't eliminate what those core functions are, and you'll see that in the budget priorities that we have for this budget. How we compare in cities, oftentimes when I talk about the property tax piece, people will say, well, you're not raising, you're just raising it on fees. No, we're not. There's no fee increases either in this budget, either this general fund budget. There are no fee increases. There's no tax rate increase. And if you look at what we do in water and sewer, this is our water and sewer. This is also the larger thing that's necessary for everybody, so it's not a luxury. But these are our fees. So if you look at the area cities, we're the lowest. If you look at the statewide, we're in the bottom 10% in cost in water and sewer, and that includes new construction. Our SAC and WAC, which are those sewer access charges and water access charges, when you do new construction, ours are the lowest in the area. So those are also important to understand when it look at new development and construction. By category, you can see where we put our priorities. If you look back at that, what I talked about, the priorities, public safety and infrastructure, our priorities are public safety and infrastructure, and those are where the dollars have been, and they've been in each budget. We always prioritize public safety as our top priority. We're putting additional dollars into this budget. We're actually adding and paying for an additional 7 police officers. We're adding 4 officers. The other 3 officers were previously paid for by St. Cloud State University and the Technical Community College. That payment is no longer happening, but our commitment to public safety is not being reduced at all. We're paying for those officers out of the general fund budget, so it's reflected in this budget here. If you look at as I mentioned before, in our public safety, we have always prioritized every budget. And it doesn't mean we just put more dollars, we put more resources, but we also do things smarter and we work through collaborative efforts. The Cop House is a great example of that. That's paid for by the private sector. There's a foundation that was set up. The Rotary's been a big part of that. Those are private funds that paid for the house, that help pay for the assets in there. We're a partner in it, and it has made a tremendous impact in the neighborhood that it's in. This is by fund. If you look at this general fund, this is looking at the overall budget. It's up over 2021. But if you recall from 2021 to 2020, we made a significant reduction. So that was an anomaly. I think it'll be an asterisk forever in almost any budgeting thing. 2020 with COVID-19 changed a lot of things, so it changes a little bit. But we cut significantly from that budget. But we're still capturing the growth. We're not going above. Where does the money come from? Property tax is a big chunk of that. Local government aid, that's dollars that go to cities, regional centers. We're a city of 68,000 people, but a daytime population of over 180,000 people. You wouldn't expect the property taxpayers to pay for all the people that come into the community on a daily basis. So that's why we have local government aid. We also, for a lot of our assets, use sales tax or other ways to generate funds so that the property taxpayer doesn't handle the full burden, especially in a city like ours where 80% of the properties pay property tax, 20% of the properties pay no property tax. So if you look at these are government facilities or nonprofits. So that would also be a significant burden on that 80% if we didn't have other ways to offset those costs. Where does the money go? Public safety. Number one top thing that we put fund in. If you look at public works and public safety, those are the top 2. But even part of our information technology budget goes to public safety. There's a lot of technology in those squad cars, and that's important. The cameras that we use downtown in public safety. Debt service. If you look at roads, that's where a lot of that debt service is. So roads are part of our public works project. We bond for those roads, and because of that, that debt service is part of that infrastructure and debt service on some of the buildings that we have. Including our fire stations and police stations. So public safety is still a big part of that. 2021 versus 22, again, in 2021, that budget was down over $2 million. Spending is up, but if you actually have to go back to 2020 to see, it was down significantly, so we put additional dollars in there. Flat tax rate in both budgets, no increase in fees in both budgets. We reduced staff. We had a hiring freeze. We reduced staff in the last year's budget by 9 people. We've increased staff here by 9 people, so basically it's a wash. It's not the same positions. As I mentioned before, we're putting dollars into public safety, and public works is where you'll see that staff. And the attorney's office, again, when we take individuals who are an issue in our public safety issue, we have to prosecute them, and we do also have a number of things as a city that has a lot of construction going on. There are a lot of contracts or a lot of things that are done, and so that need is there. But we also do the prosecution, and we do some of the for the other area cities. So when we add attorneys, oftentimes we've added attorneys in the past paid for by some of the area cities. Infrastructure projects that we've done this year, you'll see a significant, we did a number this year, we did a number last year, but we also this year did a significant amount of mill and overlays, reconstruction. In fact, I think we had, if you look at about over 10 miles this year in both new reconstruction and mill and overlays. Next year, we've got 20 miles. So if you take that next year, in fact, it was less than 10 miles. It was 8, because we're more than doubling the amount of road work. And this year was a big year. I think you probably heard from people. We did a lot of mill and overlays. We did a lot of those areas that really needed it. Next year, we're doing more than double that in 2022. And so you'll see that. You'll see a map that we're doing. This is the map that kind of gives you an indication, 2021, 2022. And I can tell you there's a few parts on here that we just updated in the last several days because of the favorable bidding climate that we've had. When we have additional dollars on what we budgeted for roads, we put that back into roads. So you'll see, in fact, I think up in the upper north there, Mill Creek, that's a road that we're doing. That's on next year's list also. It's not on this map. There's a few other places that are on this list that you'll see in the newsletter. You'll see the full updated list coming out here soon. So there's even a little more than this. This gives you a little harder way of seeing it, but it gives you all of the roads that are in here. So you see, it's not only that we're doing these roads, we're doing them all over the city, so they're not picking one particular area. We go through a process. You heard that process at the study session that Mr. Voss and Ms. Hodel talked about. This. We do this based on the need. We have over 400 miles of roadway, so we need to do it in a systematic way. What happens next? This is the preliminary budget tonight. If after the public hearing you believe it's the right direction, we'll pass this tonight. We'll still have opportunity to discuss this budget, and then we'll have truth and taxation in December. So this is just, again, the shorter version of the budget, but we are focusing on our priorities. We're doing it in a way that doesn't raise the tax burden to the individuals in our community, but doesn't lower the quality of the service that we have, whether that's infrastructure or whether that's in public safety. So with that, Mr. President, I'll turn it back over to you for the public hearing.